Charlie, for me, Charlie, like, he displayed a sense of love and caring. Like, he came across to me as a person who really cares about us. Right? And for me personally, I never had that many people in my life who cared anything about me, including my own self.
It's hard for anyone to come to me and tell me that Charlie is phony, because you cannot come back time after time and play the same role and still be phony. It's impossible.
Well, when I first started coming to these marathons back in 1987, I was introduced to Charlie, and we talked a little bit, and I was very turned inside of myself. Everything was I was kind of in my own little world. And I found that Charlie was, you talk about his love and his caring for others and his unconditional acceptance of everybody. And that's one of the first things that I've ever experienced with Charlie, was how he just kind of took me in and gave you his hugs and his love and his caring and just his time. I mean, it kind of meant a lot to me personally.
And every time I get the opportunity when Charlie's up this way, I'd like to have a talk with him, and just because I always get wisdom from Charlie, and I try to apply that wisdom to my life.
I'm very happy to talk to you for a bit about Charlie Taylor. I've known him for 15 years rather intimately. We worked together on the same faculty, and when he retired in 1985 and I became principal of the school, I wondered how much we'd be working together. Charlie doesn't quit. He's gone on working for us and with us all through these 10 years of alleged retirement. To meet Charlie Taylor is to feel the impact. It's true at every level of his living. He's made a tremendous impact on theological education. Fairly high-powered, high-level, higher education system. But Charlie Taylor has done something to it. 40 years ago, he was a pioneer in the field of clinical pastoral education, and the whole area of theological education has felt the draft of Charlie Taylor. Instead of being, as it so often is thought of as being, an inward, ivory tower, purely academic kind of thing, in the hands and in the life of Charlie Taylor, it became an outgoing, active, caring expression of the compassion of God. He turned it outwards. And the way he did that was by turning it towards human need. Charlie Taylor has a passionate concern for and commitment to human need.
My theology of a call, I always go back to Moses. You know, well, first he killed a man, hit him in the sand. So God doesn't call us because we're perfect. He calls us because he thinks he can use us. But when I look at the call of Moses, I see him in the back pasture of Midian, and I wonder at times how many times he hears the lash of the Egyptians on his people, and in a sense, the need becomes the call. I think that's and a sense of inwardness that I must respond to this. The need and the inwardness, but then I think you need to measure that against the community of the community of the faithful. And the old saw, you know, the young fellow saw GPC, go preach Christ, but the community said, no, that's go pick corn. That you have to measure that inwardness against some reality outside of yourself. I was born in Summerside on November 27th, 1917. Now that was a little bit after the Halifax explosion, so I exploded on the scene a long time ago. I'm a product of the Depression of the 30s. My mother was the chairman of the social committee that tried to meet some of the needs, and I can recall on a Saturday morning loading up a sleigh with food to take to somebody that didn't have it. So this has been part of my background, and I recall when I'd be probably 16 or 17 in a young people's group of going around the poorer end of the town taking pictures, or taking a picture of the jail and the area where they allowed them to come out and get some recreation. And I'm coming to a young people's group with these pictures and saying, well, now we say we're Christians, but what's going on here? Why aren't we doing something about this? After the war, and I retired from the Navy, I went back to the bank, which I had worked in prior to my service, which I spent 5 years in the Navy. And when I got out, I thought I'd like to be reemployed in the Halifax branch of the bank. And they said okay to that. So I was there, and about 2 days later, the superintendent's office called up and said, you're going to be transferred to Spring Hill. But I think if I hadn't gone to Spring Hill, I'd not be sitting here talking with you today. I went back to work in the bank there and became active in the local Baptist church. In the fall, in the late fall, I was boarding on the outskirts of the town, and the folk there had a little, I don't know what you call them, I call them gutta-perka dogs, little wire-haired terrier that hopped along on 3 legs. And he and I went walking across the fields out back over the hills there beyond Spring Hill on a Sunday afternoon. And I felt that I was the nearest thing that I was at a crossroads, and one foot was going one way, one going another. And I came back home that afternoon. There was nobody home. And I went to my room, and something I'd never done in the middle of the day, I got down on my knees and I said, I don't know what you're asking, but you open the door and I'll go through. Now, I had no intention of quitting the bank. And that's the most dangerous prayer I ever prayed. 4 or 5 months after that, they called up from the superintendent's department again that they'd like somebody to go down to St. John's, Newfoundland. It was just at the end of the war, or after the war. And I thought again, well, I had said this prayer, you open the door and I'll walk through. I don't know what's down St. John's, but I'm going down tested. One particular evening, I was in church, an old Wesleyan church, really in the heart of the city. And there was a speaker who was home on a holiday, and this beautiful old church, and delivering a sermon that any professor of homiletics would have given him an A on. But I couldn't help but hear the beat of the drum of the Salvation Army out in the streets, and I was aware of the noise of the children and the bustle that was going on out there. And I think the thing that came to me, if the Lord were ever to return, I don't think he'd be in here. I think he'd be out in the streets with the Salvation Army. I almost took up the drum like Major Barber said, I'm going to take up the drum and follow the Army. I've always had a very warm spot in my heart for the Salvation Army. they sort of combine the social implications of the gospel along with its central core. So I got sort of inner turmoil trying to figure where I'm going. And I packed up everything, put it under my bed, and went on a holiday. After I came home, I got in touch with Jim Davison. He got in touch with Dr. Patterson, who was the president of the university here at the time, who was his father-in-law. And on a Sunday afternoon, I got this call from, this is F.W. Patterson speaking. He said, we've got a bed here in Horton Academy, the residence, and the bed is for you, and we're looking for you down here on Tuesday morning. So, what can you do? I went to Halifax, and Charlotte and I talked about it, and she was working with Air Canada, what was previously Trans-Canada Airlines, in the Nova Scotia Hotel. So I sat in the lobby of the Nova Scotia Hotel and wrote my resignation from the bank and walked down to the superintendent's office in George Street and gave him my resignation, and which he accepted, and told me if I wanted to come back in the summers, I was going to university, that they would employ me. I never went back. It wasn't that I didn't like the work, but I felt there's another call. Kierkegaard calls a sense of inwardness. I think from the time I was a young fellow, people would say, well, he's going to be a minister, and I'd say, well, that's what they think. They're not going to push me into this. So I stalled my way along till 29. I contacted the pastor of United Memorial Church, which was Charlotte's home church, and which I went to during my time in the Navy. It was right around the corner from the naval establishment, and asked him whether he would speak to a man in the congregation who was associated with the Old Maritime School of Social Work. And he wrote me back and said, well, he would do that, but he thought I was making a mistake. That it ought to be the ministry I was considering. Well, he didn't know I was considering it, but it's this kind of, But when you first asked the question, I think my mind went to an older lady who was not very highly educated at all, but we were doing things together in a group in the church in Spring Hill. And she said to me one time, I think you ought to be in the ministry. And I valued that coming from her. So I think I sort of tested it out against the community of faith. I think that's a very personal thing, that angst. The lines of Augustine come, our hearts are restless until they rest in thee, O God, that somehow there is maybe the words of Thompson's poem, The Hound of Heaven, best describes that. I fled him down the arches of the years from those strong feet that followed after. That's that sense of there's God help me, I can do no other. Oh, yes, I am a mystic. Yeah. And I think that a lot of people sit on our church pews and feel empty because there's no experience of the mystic or the mystery of in Him we live and move and have our being. A lot of people probably tune into this through nature. The marvel, the wonder. They say, well, I can worship in nature. What they're really experiencing is a sense of being part of something that's bigger than themselves. I think that we need an experience to know that there's a reality beyond the wall. That we can have absolutely correct theology, and we have it in our heads, but we've never really experienced it. There's a mystical sense of presence, that I'm part of a community that transcends history, that I belong. These are are people who have been touched by the Spirit. And for instance, 3 years or so ago, I was discovered that I had cancer, and besides looking to the Gospels, I thought, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to get Carlo Coretto's stuff off the shelf, and I'm going to read it, and he's going to be with me on the journey, or I'm going to be with him. Someplace Kierkegaard said that Christ is as near to us today as he was to the thief on the cross. We divide it with the centuries, but God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. Then we are as near to that event in the heart of God as were the people around the foot of the cross. So with these people that have gone before, the years in between don't matter. We have we share a common dream. A dream of the kingdom.
I'm incarcerated for taking somebody's life. I really had to get in touch with that and feel that and understand why I did that and understand the hurt and the pain that I've caused the victim's family, my own family, the community. So, I find the people in the marathons very supportive and they really stick together. And for a long time I thought, I was the only person that had a lot of these hurts and pains, and I was ashamed and guilt to talk about abuse as a child. And I come into the marathon, and everybody else is just like me. We're all the same, and I guess it's like Charlie says, we're more alike than different.
I, come into stay with the group in the same place until the group has a break.
First time I met Charlie Taylor was up in Renouse, Atlantic Institution. And it was my first marathon session. And I remember we were sitting in a circle, and they were passing around this rabbit, and they wanted us to hug this rabbit. Now, growing up as a child, I'd never ever done that before because I never ever felt any love or any affection or anything. And when they passed me this rabbit, I just kind of sloughed it off to the next guy. Anyway, when Charlie went over to England and he wrote his book, I believe it was A Letter from Grandpa, and he wrote about that incident in the chapel. And he come up and said to me after I threw the rabbit, he says, Mike, he says, if you let go of all that hurt and pain, and if you're able to brace that rabbit and hug it and love it, he said, you know, your life will become much more peaceful. And I guess I really went back to my cell that night and I started thinking about that, and I started thinking about the man himself.
When offenders are incarcerated, they don't lose their right under Canadian law for their freedom to religion, and so we make sure that they have that as an option. Naturally, when we think about chaplaincy, we think of chaplains, but chaplaincy is far bigger than just chaplains. We have chaplains, we have volunteers, we actually have chaplains out in the community helping offenders after they get out on the street, and volunteers that help them. And we have programs that are run both by chaplains and on occasion by volunteers. And the marathon program, which is run by Charlie Taylor, really fits that second category. Charlie Taylor is a wonderful volunteer, in fact probably the most important volunteer that we've had in the Correctional Service of Canada. And he runs a program called the Marathon down at Spring Hill Institution, and that has been running for about 26, 27 years. I had one parole officer tell me when I first moved down here from the prairies that he didn't go much for religion that was going on in the chapels and this and that, but that program that was run by that Dr. Taylor or somebody down in Spring Hill, anybody who went to that a lot of times, when they came out of the institution, they were different. So even cynical people have noticed a difference. Certainly a number of the offenders themselves have.
Kairos is a Greek word for time. It's a different kind of time than we have on our watch. This is a moment when something significant is going to happen. So it's Kairos, and it's marathon in the sense that it is an extended period of time, so that not only do we get an opportunity to become more of a group in a couple of days together, but we develop a history. You told me something yesterday. Is that the same story you told me yesterday? So we develop a history, and then we go on, and someone will say, well, I remembered in a session a year ago when you told us this. Chap not too far sitting on the floor from me. He was doing a life sentence, and he had a very violent record and was really having a tough time in the prison right then. And he had shared with us through the day. And in the prayer time, one of the volunteers said a prayer specifically mentioning his name. And he leaned over to the person next to him and said, "Did she say my name?" Somebody to say your name was very powerful for him. Among those in the marathon circle at one time was a young man who had become a member of the Third Order of St. Francis, which is an order for laypersons. I knew how meaningful that was to him. So when Charlotte and I were in Europe on one occasion, we visited Assisi, and we walked down over the hill to the little church of San Damiano, where St. Francis had the vision of the Lord appearing to him and telling him to rise up and rebuild the church. So I thought it would be wonderful if I could get a picture of this young man. And I wrote to the chaplain at Spring Hill and asked him if he'd send me his picture. So when we were in the Church of San Damiano, we went down to the little chapel where Francis had the vision. And we put his picture up on the altar and took a picture of it and brought it back to him. I think it was very meaningful for him to have that connection, and also I think that that concern. At midnight there would be a communion service, and I recall kneeling to receive the elements of communion at the altar with a lifer on either side of me. And I tried to process that and thought it was very, very wonderful to be there with them on either side. But as I processed it one day, I thought, gee, you know, maybe this young person is there even more worthily than I am. He can experience the depth of where else can I turn? Only you have eternal life. And it wasn't something that he was going to, with frequency, in a kind of routine way that can so often happen with us in the church on the corner. I'm not saying that everybody in the church on the corner goes that way, but I sensed the depth of the rightness of both of them being there.
I think it was his 20th anniversary here that we had a gathering for him, and we had some ex-prisoners come back in, and that was the banner that we chose for Charlie, the Good Shepherd. And yes, he has been the Good Shepherd here. He has been the Good Shepherd in Wolfville at Acadia Divinity College. He has been a Good Shepherd in Halifax, where you name it. The Good Shepherd leads you, and the Good Shepherd never turns his back on you. And the Good Shepherd is one who cares and one who nourishes, to me, and that's Charlie Taylor.
It's an immeasurable love that has been Charlie's contribution. There's no way in which we can adequately express it in what he has given to Spring Hill, to the men here, down through the years. But I think it's an immeasurable love that he's offered us.
I remember him. Do you remember him?
Yes, he's from the province here.
Yeah, and one time we were in Manitoba, in Winnipeg, and we drove out to Saskatoon to see him.
Mm-hmm. It's been great working together. When Charlie first went to the prison, I didn't go for a couple of years because the children were smaller, but he would come back, and for a couple of days he'd be sort of back at the prison within himself, and that was fine. I knew what was happening, but it was great when I could go along with him. When I first went, I wondered if they were going to accept me as Charlie's wife or as a woman. They were used to him, but I found that they did, I think they saw me more as a, well, not in the first years, but later on, saw me more as a grandmother. And grandmothers were very important to them. Grandmothers had brought a lot of them up. When things weren't going well at home, they went with their grandparents. So I found I was really well accepted. I feel really privileged to be in a prison ministry. And I found through the years, sometimes our faith gets a little bit dry over the years as we grow, as we travel on our journey. I found that prison ministry really gave wings to my faith, as it were, and feet to my prayers. It was, if you want faith to be meaningful, go to prison.
The picture on the wall was given to me by a chaplain in one of our prisons. I guess he gave it to me because I made a collection of clowns. The clown has appealed to me for years. I see the clown, and underneath it the text, "He was wounded for our transgressions, and with his stripes we are healed." The clown, I think historically, has been seen as a symbol of Christ. The clown brings laughter, he brings joy, but behind the mask there is a lot of pain and suffering. And Christ brings healing and health and wholeness, but it is the suffering servant who brings that. I didn't get called originally to stop. I got called to get going, and I don't think in the great scheme of the divine that there's any timeline there. You don't get old age pension from the kingdom. You're not put on pension, so you keep right on to the end of the road. If I were to put something on a tombstone, if that's what you're coming at, then I'd put, "God is love, and only love heals." Period.